Good evening. My name is Ann Thompson. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Larimer County. We'd like to welcome you to the Forum for Candidates for the Poudre School District Board of Education. As a nonpartisan organization, the League never supports or opposes any candidate or political party. For nearly 100 years, a large part of League's mission has been to educate and inform voters to increase their participation in government at all levels. This forum is part of those efforts in the Poudre School District. I'd like to thank the City of Fort Collins for making this forum possible. It's being televised live and will be rebroadcast prior to the election on Channel 14, and we thank Channel 14 as well. This election is a mail-in ballot election. Ballots will be sent to voters on October 16th. If you don't receive your ballot within a week, please contact the Larimer County Clerk's office. Drop-off locations will be available as an alternative to mailing your ballot. In addition, there will be voter service and polling center locations open 8 days prior to and including Election Day on November 7th. Candidates in this election are chosen at large. This means that even though candidates must reside in a particular district, the Poudre School District voters will cast ballots in each district race. Serving as a Board of Education Director is a volunteer position for a 4-year term. A brief review of our format. Each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes for an introduction. This is an opportunity to include any biographical information that may be useful to voters. After opening statements, I will pose questions that have been submitted by members of the audience and screened to avoid duplication. In some cases, I may combine related questions together. Candidates will have 1 minute or 60 seconds to answer each question. The timing will be done on the automatic electronic lights that you see close to the candidates. The green will indicate when the candidate starts to answer the question, yellow will indicate 30 seconds remaining, and the red will mean time's up. All the responses will be timed for fairness. At the conclusion of the question answer period, each candidate will be asked to make a closing statement of 1 minute. We will go in order and stagger the order in which the first candidate gets to respond. So the first question for our candidates: why are you running, and what skills or experiences do you bring to this position? And we'll start the questioning with John.
Thank you. Appreciate the chance to be here tonight. I'm running for this job because I owe a debt of gratitude to the Poudre School District. That district has educated 5 children that my wife and I have, plus 6 of our grandchildren, and we still got 3 in the system and 2 sons who teach there. So in the experiences that I've had as a member of the Fort Collins City Council, I've spent a lot of time right here in this room. Also an opportunity to serve as the Larimer County Commissioner. I've learned an awful lot about making public policy, and I'd like to take that experience that I've had and combine it with what I consider to be a lot of common sense that I've learned through the years. From not having common sense, you learn how to have it. And then I've also been able to combine that with a little bit of wisdom. And as I think about the debt of gratitude that I owe, the experience I've had, I think I have an awful lot to offer to the school district, this time making policy for education. With my background, my wife and I have taught a lot. We are teachers who have taught photography to other professional photographers all over the United States. We've been to 39 states and Canada teaching other pros how to be better at their profession, and we have loved and enjoyed that opportunity to teach. I realize that's a little bit different than what you see in public school education, but it helped us to know a lot about what we need to do to teach. Lastly, in the few seconds I have left, I want to tell you about my legacy in education. A grandmother who was elected superintendent of schools in 1911. the year after women were given the vote in Wyoming. This woman was in Gillette, if you can imagine, as a single woman. And beyond that, my mom taught 36 years in the Denver Public Schools. My sister was a teacher, and I have 2 boys who currently teach in the Poudre School system. And I'm just pleased to have this opportunity to be here tonight.
Kristen?
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming tonight, taking time out of your evening to spend with us. I really appreciate it. As a parent, an educator, and a public librarian, I do believe that education should be the great equalizer. And I also know that even in a warm, welcoming school district like Poudre, that there is still an opportunity gap that we need to close. Every child deserves a great education, and I am committed to making that happen. And that is why I am running for school board in District C. I have the passion and I have the experience to be a leader on the Poudre School Board. I've been publicly educated myself, kindergarten all the way through my bachelor's in industrial engineering, and then on into my master's degree of educational technology and media. I have 2 kids who are in the Poudre School District. One recently graduated from Poudre High School in the IB program, one who is still in Poudre High School in the AP program. I've been volunteering for Poudre School District now for 20 plus years. I started actually volunteering before I had kids at Channel 10, doing camera work much like this, and continued on with my kids, doing doing Tavelli, the Readathon, the PTO, and currently at Poudre High School in the theater group, still doing that. Currently the digital literacy librarian at Poudre River Public Library District, and where I teach kids 8 to 88 the wonders of technology and how to use it. And I am also the president of PFLAG in Northern Colorado, Fort Collins chapter, where we focus on education, advocacy, and support of the LGBT community. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristen. Christophe?
Good evening, and first, thank you very much to the League of Women Voters for having us and giving us an opportunity to speak tonight. So, my name is Christophe Febvre, and I am running again for the District D seat, and I'm a local native of Fort Collins, having gone through the school system myself, done elementary, Lincoln Junior High and Poudre High School, and also having brought 3 of my children through those same schools. I am running again because this has been a fantastic experience. It's an incredible way to volunteer back into the community and to continue the work that we've been doing as a board to bring first a new superintendent into the district, working very closely with her to create opportunities to grow an already fantastic district and looking towards a vision for the future. And it's something I'm really compelled to do for the next 4 years some more. The experience I bring is I'm a local business person and engineer, bringing those skills into how to collaborate with my colleagues on the board and with the administration of the community, of the superintendent of the district. So with that, I'll turn it over. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Hi, thank you, Ann, and thank you, everybody, for coming. And I also would like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this on. I was here in 2015. I ran in 2015 because in May of 2014, I was appointed to the board. So my first stint on the board was as an appointee. And I have to say that when I first got onto the board, I really wasn't very familiar with a lot of the school issues. But what I learned quickly was that there was a lot of things that were going on that were very important, and I felt a little bit chagrined that I hadn't paid attention to it. And I spent my first year on the board working very hard to learn about all of the different issues that our parents and teachers were facing. And so I would say that one thing that I do bring to the board is the past 3 years I've worked hard and I've studied hard to learn all of the issues. And I've thought that I've worked well with the rest of the board and that we've come a long way. We did do the long-range planning this last 2 years, and I think that was one of the big accomplishments of the board. And what experience I bring to the board, I'm a longtime resident of Wellington, where I live now, and I'm the representative for that area. I grew up there. I went to PSD schools. My kids all went to PSD schools, and I think I'm very familiar with the local issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to some general questions that you might anticipate. I'm going to combine a couple together here. People would like to know, what are the most important issues or the priorities? Could you please list 3? Kristen, we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. So yes, I have 3 main issues. The first is transparency. As the digital literacy librarian and also a working mom, I understand how difficult it is to get out here on a weekend or a weeknight or a weekend to come to a meeting. So what I would love to see is more transparency and openness with our community by doing maybe some social media, being able to have that open communication 24 hours a day. The second one is the funding crisis that's looming. My volunteer experience has enabled me to go down to the state legislature for the past 3 years and work with our current legislators, working for equality for all Coloradoans. And I am committed to making that same commitment to PSD to go down to work and advocate for PSD. The last is the opportunity gap that we have. When we break down our test scores and our graduation rates, there is a gap in our socioeconomic, when we break down by socioeconomic and by race. One idea I have is to hire more diverse teachers to serve as mentors and role models for some of those students. And so those are my 3 main issues: transparency, funding, and the opportunity gap.
Thank you. Christophe?
I feel like the 3 most important things we're working on as a board, I would start with probably the growth of our community and the growth of the student population and how we're managing that. How we're going to deal, whether or not we eventually sell bonds, how we're going to take all the students and continue the education as we move forward. Secondly, I would say that indeed the opportunity gap is something that we're putting a great deal of effort into and thinking very hard about how to create these opportunities and provide the best mechanism for educating every student in the district. And I do feel that the funding as we go along is incredibly important, and the decisions we make as a board with what we have is one of the biggest things we're doing these days. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn?
I think that my most important issues, they're kind of hard to pick from because there's a lot of important work going on, but funding is one of the biggest looming problems for the district right now. We will be heading towards the base of funding here very soon. Colorado used to be one of the top 10 states in the United States for funding. We are now at about 48th, and we are heading to the bottom quickly. So we need to put a permanent funding mechanism in place to fund schools that's fair. Another issue would be getting kids ready for the workforce. I'm a business owner, and I hear from people in the business community that they would like to see kids come better prepared. And then the long-range planning, planning for growth, I think is going to be critical in the next 2 years. We're going to be having a lot of explosive growth up and down the Front Range, and especially in Wellington and Timnath. And so we need to be planning those schools and for the growth that's coming.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. One of the big things I have in my mind that we need to work on in Poudre School District is facilities. We're bogged down right now in a lawsuit after a bond issue that passed. We're bogged down in that lawsuit, and that delay is costing taxpayers millions of dollars. Every day that delays, as you know, the cost of construction goes up. We've also possibly got an increase in interest rates when those bonds are eventually sold, and so on. That needs to be solved right now quickly, and it doesn't happen easily because it's in court, but I would commit myself to work hard on that. Money comes from Denver for schools, and I've had experience down there in lobbying a lot. Comes from 6 people, really. The Joint Budget Committee controls the budget. When it gets to the House and the Senate floor, very little is changed from what's decided. So we need to work with those 6 people and find out how to change things. And last, I think we need to educate those who really aren't college-bound and figure out ways to give them a path to good living.
Thank you. So I'm going to combine these 2 together. They're very similar. What should a 21st century student know upon graduation? What should our public education system be doing to ensure our students are prepared for the future? And Christophe, we'll start with you this time.
Yes, in many ways, education is not changing as we go into the 21st century, and in many ways it is changing. And I think it is something that the board is thinking deeply about. Things that are changing are things like, what do buildings look like? If you think of a building we build today that's going to be in use 50 and 60 and 70 years from now, what does that mean to students? What does it mean for kids who maybe are going to work on the internet more, maybe from home in diverse mechanisms, and that's very important. But I think on the other side of that, young people will forever remain young people who need to learn the basics. And importantly, something we've been talking a lot about is learn about themselves, about their emotions, about their social skills, and develop all of that. And those are the things that I think I work on and bring to the board.
When I think about a 21st century student and how to measure if they're prepared, I think about are kids prepared for the changing job market? Are we doing enough to educate kids for the jobs that are going to be coming? And do we have the right equipment at the school to train them for the jobs that are coming? And so I think in that aspect, I think one thing that we are currently doing that helps is the ICAP, which is the Individual Career and Academic Plan for our kids, to help them identify what they're interested in and what jobs are available, and help them start thinking about that as early as 6th grade, about what they might want to do. And so I think that it's very important for kids to understand what kinds of things will be available, and I think it's important for us to understand what we need to do as far as equipment goes in school buildings to get them ready for those jobs.
Thank you. John?
When I think about what students should know, one of the things that comes to my mind, first of all, is when they get out of school, how to make a living, so that they've got a skill, so that they've got knowledge that they can put to work in the workplace, whether it be in the public sector or private sector, so that they can benefit themselves, and if they decide to have family, to take care of that family. I also think that we can continue to work with Front Range in terms of the concurrency that we experience now between students in the Poudre system and students who go there and receive education and all kinds of good things that may not really require a total 4-year college degree. One of the things, though, that I would encourage them to add there is something to help people who want to become entrepreneurs. My wife and I have run our own little photography business in Fort Collins for 47 years. And that is a great opportunity to have some freedom in your life, to enjoy being involved in entrepreneurship. In order to do that, you've got to know accounting, you've got to know bookkeeping, and other things that may not be taught.
Next question, and Carolyn, we'll start with you. Oh, I'm sorry. Kristen?
Yeah, if I could get a chance to answer.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
On my toes.
So no worries. So I just wanted to say the 21st century student, as a digital literacy librarian, this is actually one of the things that I teach in the library is I teach digital literacy to kids, like I said, ages 8 to 88, so itty-bitties all the way up. And one of the things that I see is how to use the digital tools appropriately, and that's what we need to be teaching kids. And they need to be using some computer science, regardless of whether they're doing post-secondary careers or post-secondary schooling. They will be needing some computer science, and that's what I'm doing right now is teaching some coding for that. And I think we need to incorporate that into the schools. The other thing that we need to do is sort of the flip side of that is the soft skills. We need to make sure that kids are learning how to work in a team, how to, just the financials, how to go ahead and do their own financials, how to make sure that they're getting to work on time, all of those soft skills that just allow a student to go ahead and be career bound. We need to be working on that as well. Thank you.
Well, it's time to move on to money. So, Carolyn, you will get the first money question. The school district's budget is tight, and cuts may be required. You've all alluded to that. Should cuts be necessary, what are the values that you will apply to help you decide what to cut in the budget?
Well, this is going to be, I think, a discussion that's going to require some input from the community. But as far as my values go, I am in favor of keeping cuts as far away from children as possible. So to that end, I think that cuts would probably have to start at the top, as far away from kids as possible. And then we would also have to evaluate cost of the buildings, operations, and maybe looking to see if we could cut some expenses from operations as well. But I think the guiding principle has to be to keep cuts as far away from children as possible.
Thank you. John?
I would certainly agree with that. That's what is important in the budget. When it comes to cutting budgets, my thought would be we don't want to cut the things that help kids the most, and that fits into that. But having been involved in a lot of public money type budgets in my life, one of the things that can be helpful is to say to the people who are spending that money, we as a board are not going to be making your cuts for you, because we don't know enough, and it would be silly for us to go into a budget and line on line start to cut. What we need to say to those folks is, what if you had to cut your budget 5%? What would you and what could you do without and still maintain a reasonable level of service? And let the folks who are actually spending the money decide that. You might even have them design a budget at 5 under and 10 under. And then from that point, you know that you've got people who are still going to do the job, and they'll be able to do that. And people who say to you, well, we can't do that, well, you have to have a long talk with them.
Thank you. Kristen?
Thank you. So I agree the values to apply to that are definitely keep the cuts as far away from the classroom as possible. We know that 2 cents of every dollar right now is spent for in the administration area, so maybe there's something we could do in there. The other thing that I would suggest is looking to work with other groups that are out there, municipalities and such. Poudre River Public Library District and Poudre School District actually did this, where they worked together. We had some databases that were overlapping, and we looked into that, and we were able to work together and actually purchase those databases together, saving both entities money. So I would suggest that there are other ways that we could go about, seeing what's out there, seeing how we can work with other municipalities and other groups, and seeing if there's something that we can't do to save money in that regards as well.
Thank you. Christophe?
I think as we approach these kind of issues, one of the biggest challenges we confront is maintaining equity within the district for all kids. And I think that as a value, that's one that I would be pushing on the board. Is how do we do this without raising fees for kids and leaving some kids out of education? So I think that's one value I would bring into the discussion. Clearly, I think we're all in agreement that trying to keep it away from the students in various mechanisms is part of that. It may involve looking at benefits or building costs and whatnot, but I think first and foremost, I would be thinking hard about how we maintain that education evenly across the board to the extent we can.
Thank you. Now, here's another money question, but it pertains to something else slightly different. Parents who homeschool or send schools to parochial school don't get to use the $7,500 the state spends on each student. Should the district share these funds with such parents and children? And John, we'll start with you on that one.
You bet. If parents decide to homeschool, if they decide to send their child to a private school, I think they need to forfeit whatever money is coming for public education. I know that's a tough one because in some ways you think, well, they paid their taxes, they deserve it back. But I would point out there are an awful lot of people who pay taxes who don't use the school system. Parents who don't have, well, it wouldn't be parents, they'd be people who don't have children, they're non-parents. And also some senior citizens don't have any kids anymore, maybe even any grandkids in the school system. So I resist the idea of vouchers for public, anything but public type education. I don't think you ought to give it to religious schools either. And so That's just one of those facts of life, that the money is there from the public to be used for the public education of children.
Thank you. Kristen?
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Simply put, I do not believe school vouchers are the right choice for our community. We have lots of choices in our community. We have charter schools, we have school of choice. So I find that there's no need for supporting vouchers or returning money for homeschooling, a voucher for homeschooling, if you will. The taxpayer dollars for schools are decreasing, and then putting that money towards something else is not a good use of that. And I think also, John hit upon the public school aspect. The public schools are for the public good, and so we want to make sure that everybody, the rising tide lifts all boats. So we want to make sure that all the kids are getting the best education possible with that.
Thank you. Christophe?
Yes, I'm going to agree with that as well. I feel that one of the things that we work the hardest on in school districts is using limited funds to create a great product. And I also feel that one of the things that's going on is there are various mechanisms that we can erode something that's very hard to build. It's a very large system that's trying to do a great service for the community. So for various, putting it in slightly different terms, I would agree that public dollars need to stay in the public pool to the extent we can, and that as a board, as a board member, I'd be working very hard to keep it that way. So.
Thank you. Carolyn?
And not to belabor the point, but I also agree that public money should be for public schools. I'm not in favor of vouchers or taking money away from public schools or eroding the strength of public schools. So I would not be in favor of this.
Thank you. So we'll start this next one with Kristen, and I'm going to try to put three sort of different but related questions together. There are some questions here about school of choice and charter schools. One of them wants to know what's working and what's not working for the school of choice, and then the same question appears for charter schools. And then there's another related question about charter schools. Under what circumstances should the Poudre School District reject a charter application that's presented to the board? Could you respond to those, please?
Okay. Well, we'll go with the last part first, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. So charter schools are the law, and so they're here to stay. So the only way I believe the board would be able to reject a charter school at this point would be if they don't have facilities, don't have correct funding. So something like that would be a rejection for a charter school. Otherwise, they are sort of the lay of the land and the law of the land. Going back to the first two questions of what's working, what's not working for charter and for choice schools, one of the major things is transportation. That's a major issue that kids are dealing with and parents are dealing with. There is no transportation for school of choice, nor is there transportation for charter. And that is a tough one because we would like to see more choice and we would like to see parents be able to send their kids to where they want to go, but we're also under a really tight budget, and so is it wise to be spending those kinds of dollars to go ahead and send kids to a school? So at this point, I would say that it's not a wise choice to be spending our money to send kids transportation, to spend for transportation, sending those kids to charter schools. Thank you.
Christophe?
That is a broad and complex question.
It is.
Yeah, and it's one that we spend a great deal of time thinking about. Charter schools over the last 30 years have driven a great deal of innovation, and they've even brought choice into the mainstream. And I think that in many ways that has brought a lot of excellent things into the district. I feel like the things that we're working with that are not very well suited, there are a number of them. The statute has been written almost from a point of antagonism and strife, and if it was rewritten with people holding hands a little bit more, looking at how school districts could take the ideas of charters and bring them back into the fold. And I would also argue that possibly leave a little bit more accountability back into the school board, because we have very little say in what's going on with those public dollars.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Okay, and I think I'm pretty closely aligned with what Christophe said. I think that charter schools, I don't think they are, charter schools are public schools. And I think they're a very important part of Poudre School District because they do help provide choice. And as Christophe said, they also provide innovation. So I would say in that aspect, charter schools are working well in PSD. I do wish that there was more accountability to the Board of Education with charter schools. They do have their own boards. Sometimes people are surprised to find out that we don't have much oversight of charter schools. I think that School of Choice has been working well in PSD, and I would have to agree with Kristen that one of the things that probably is not working is for some parents, choice really doesn't work because of transportation issues, but there is certainly not enough money for us to think about providing transportation for kids who want to choice in. Thanks.
Thank you. Because charter schools do receive public money, I think there's a good point that we need to, as a Board of Education, take a look at each charter application that comes in and make sure it fits the requirements. Once they do that, then I think they've fulfilled the law and they should be approved. Now, having said that, I do have a concern about charter schools because I don't think charter schools are treated as equitably as they should be in terms of the distribution of money. They don't get as much, and they have their own bills to pay for their own facilities and so on. And sometimes I feel like that's punitive against them, that it's just something because some folks don't like them. But I do support schools of choice. I think that's a good idea. But I do think, and this is an overriding principle for me, that students in the charter schools deserve equal funding to students in any other school in the system.
Thank you. Okay, Christophe, I believe that you're first for this next question, which is a question about the Daca program. So in light of the recent Daca controversy, how can you ensure that all students have access to a quality education at PSD?
As I understand it, there is in no way a need for the school district to really involve itself in any of that. So we ask no questions, and we, in every way possible, educate every child that comes in front of or within the school building. And in no way would I look to change that myself.
And I, too, do not think that PSD needs to get involved in that. I think that we are committed to every child in our district, no matter where they're at or where they come from. We are firmly committed to educating every child every day in our district.
John, your comments?
Yes. These children that we're talking about were brought into this country by parents who brought them here, and these children really had no choice. We owe it to them to educate them just for the sake of humanity. I think it's an important aspect of what we do because we're compassionate people, because we want to see these young kids educated, and it's really to our advantage as a society. If they're going to be here and they're going to be part of our society, let's educate them and not sit around and worry so much. And I don't want to check IDs at the door either.
I have to agree with everything that was said here. PSD does not check to see where they're coming from or who they are, or if they're legal or not legal, and that is a good thing. We need to be educating every child every day, and like John said, it's for the benefit of our community. Again, public education is for the public good, and everything that we do to educate our children right now, we're educating our future doctors, lawyers, business owners, auto mechanics. So it's very important that we keep that in mind, that these are our future community members and we need to treat them as such. Thank you.
Carolyn, you'll go first on this question, which has to do with communication. Is it important for the school board to reach out to residents who are not otherwise connected to schools? If so, what ideas do you have to increase connections with them?
Well, I think as far as reaching out to residents, there's some, I think, very logical ways to reach out to the community. I hear from the business community all the time that they would like to be more involved in what's going on in our schools. And I think that we are starting to do that by reaching out to businesses to have some of the children in our district serve internships with the business community. So I think we should continue to strengthen that relationship with the business community. And I also think that we should be reaching out to our grandparents. I think that's just a wonderful wealth of love, I think, that kids could benefit from, and bringing them into the schools to help out.
John?
Oh, I loved hearing about the grandparents. We, as I mentioned, have 6 grandkids who've gone all the way through Poudre schools. We've still got 3 grandkids in the school and more to come. Lolly and I have 19 total. And we could actually tell you their names if we had time. In terms of communication with people in the community, I love the idea of working with businesses. I think the idea of having internships for our students is excellent. I think that gives them a chance to take a look. In our business, Lolly and I have always had what we called a trained kid. That would be someone who comes in and helps you with your business after school. And I don't mean anything demeaning by calling them a trained kid, because you teach them what you need to get done, and they work and you pay them, and it's a good deal. I love the idea of encouraging volunteerism. There's nothing better than being able to volunteer and help kids. I've done that with Boy Scouts. I've probably got them through more citizenship merit badges and photography merit badges than I could ever count, and it's a great feeling.
Kristen?
So yes, I do believe it's very important to keep all community members engaged and involved in what the schools are doing. Again, like I had said, you're talking about future community members. So people who may not have kids in the system currently, or grandkids in the system currently, they have to keep in mind that they are educating their future community members, whoever they might be, and that it's very important to engage them. And to do that, we can talk to our business owners, we can talk to our local politicians, we can talk to all of these people and have them come into the schools and discuss what it is that they're doing. I think it's very important to keep them engaged and knowing what's going on in the schools.
The schools are not only a community treasure, but they're an economic and quality of life driver. So there's no question in my mind that communicating to the public is vital. And it's not just to parents of students, but it's to the community at large. And it became incredibly important as we went out to seek more money that we explain why and what it means to the community. What I have felt has been important is creating not only relationships across the community. One of the committees I'm on is working with the city council and the commissioners. That's one mechanism, but also creating incredible relationships with the media around town and with the Chamber of Commerce and with as many people as we possibly can.
Thank you. Now we're going to move to some questions that have to do with curriculum. John, you get the first one, or the first shot at this one. What is your opinion about teaching sex education in the Poudre School District?
Well, I can remember when I went to my father as a 6th grader with a piece of paper that he had to sign for me to take sex education. And I was a little embarrassed. And I kind of went up and said, hey, I'm going to go down to go to sex education. And he said, what'd you say? And I said, this is sex education. And I handed that to him. What my father said was, if you want to learn about sex, join the Army. Now, that was not the way it ought to be done. My father had some weird ideas, and that was one of them. But I do believe that we need to give factual information about sexuality to kids. It's a part of life. It's something that we need to talk to them about. We need to be able to give them some good information. But I don't want to see one type of morality or another necessarily infused into that. That's what comes at home. You can give them the diagrams of the different things, and you can explain how all that works. But when it comes to the values and the way that those particular parts of our lives are conducted, it needs to be done in the home.
So the sexual education curriculum is selected by the same process as all the other curriculums. Teachers, subject matter experts, parents, and community members weigh in on that. I believe that age-appropriate, comprehensive sexual education, which includes sexual identity, gender identity, and relationships, should be a part of the PSD sexual education. Too often, the LGBT community is excluded from this topic. And this directly opposes PSD's inclusion, and it often results in physical and mental harm for those students. So if we are really talking about being an all-inclusive and promoting inclusivity in our schools, we need to make sure that the sexual education is also inclusive. Thank you.
I have said at a number of board meetings that my suspicion is if you make a child feel safe at school, their outcomes will improve. So if we want to see achievement go up, make every kid in a school feel safe. I think what that means to me is teaching social and emotional intelligence as a curriculum. It means teaching children about themselves and about each other from the moment they're in preschool all the way through 12th grade. Sex education is a piece of that. How we think about one another and our interactions is a big part of that. And I do indeed believe that there is a place for that in our school system.
I'm supportive of giving kids information that helps them to keep safe and makes them feel safe. I think I agree with Christophe that kids learn best when they feel safe and when they feel accepted. And I think that when we give kids information, we empower them and we help them to understand what's going on with them and with other students around them. And I think that that helps them to make good decisions and will keep them safe.
And now another question about curriculum. And Kristen, you will go first on this one. And this is one I'm going to combine 2 or 3 things together here. In general, how much instructional leeway would you allow to accommodate conflicting public opinions on science issues such as evolution or climate change? Related to that, should there be a place in the district's curriculum for intelligent design? And how should the district teach about climate change? So related to science, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to that, the way the curriculum has been chosen. And so the curriculum is chosen by the subject matter experts, the teachers, has input from the parents and also the community. And that is how that starts. And then we have to look at the preponderance of evidence with science as well. So the preponderance of evidence overwhelmingly suggests that that climate change is real, evolution is real. And so we don't want to be teaching what other people might be considering other theories or other, if it's not in that preponderance of evidence and scientific evidence, then we should not be teaching that.
Thank you. Christophe, your response.
It's a complicated question again, and so I think I'll just try to apply values to it, which I think is what the question is seeking. In general, I would always like to see education stick to what we generally consider factual, but I also view education as all about curiosity. And to the extent that education always focuses on allowing students to explore and ask questions and debate, I'm open to just about anything. But to the extent that we bring in a textbook and promote a certain subject, I'd like it to be factually based. So the question was about intelligent design, and that would not be one I would consider in that category. Climate change, I would put in the category of something that I would just really like to see factual data presented and allow for a lot of room for students to explore. So,
thank you. Carolyn?
And then I'll reiterate what Kristen said, which is that we do have a process for selecting textbooks for kids, and that we should stick to that. And I do believe that what we choose should be factually based. And so I would not be in favor of maybe teaching things that are considered maybe outside of the mainstream or that are not fact-based. So I would like to see us stick to fact-based research.
Thank you. Thank you. In terms of leeway, when I think about especially 2 subjects like climate change and evolution, there is a lot out there. in terms of what we can talk about. I don't think anybody's really arguing about climate change. I think what we're arguing about is what causes it and exactly what cost there is to society to combat what some people don't think is that big a deal from the standpoint of human involvement. Now, there are schools of thought right here in Fort Collins. I point at now passed away Dr. Gray, who questioned human-made climate change. Why, in that situation, don't we explain that there are different points of view? Climate's going to change, for heaven's sakes. We had ice ages, and we see things have happened. As far as intelligent design, I guess that has to do with what religion would call creation. But on the other hand, we see things in this earth that we think are pretty old. And this factual thing worries me a little bit, because facts change. And there was a time when people thought the earth was flat, and that was a fact.
Okay, Christophe, we'll start with you on this one. This has to do with, there are a couple of questions that have to do with student rights. Student rights. How best can the school district reconcile students' First Amendment free speech rights with the current general environment of uncivil discourse? For example, should student athletes feel free to kneel during the national anthem?
I think student athletes should feel free to kneel for the anthem as long as they feel no pressure to do such. My experience at football games, for example, is there are times where it appears that the entire the entire team is doing it, and it leans towards a sense of students feeling pressure to do things. But freedom of speech is very important within the bounds of what is acceptable. We've had to contend with a number of issues where we find ourselves having to explore that line, and wherever possible, we allow as much freedom of speech as long as it doesn't interfere with other students' ability to feel comfortable and safe. And I think that's a good way to keep going.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Thank you, and I agree with Christophe. If a student wants to kneel, he should feel free to kneel. So I would support that student's right to do so. And I also think that a student's right to expression of free speech probably ends where another child's right starts. So if something that a child is going to say is going to be hurtful or denigrating to another student, then it probably should not be said. And I think when we get into that area there, we're talking maybe a little bit about bullying. And so I think rights of students have to be balanced with the right of other kids not to be bullied. But I do support the right of students to free speech, and I would support a student's right to kneel at a game.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I think free speech is exactly that. It's free speech. But on the other hand, I think we need to make sure that when a student does that, kneeling at a athletic event when the national anthem is played, that they understand what it means to respect and to honor that flag. One of the most prized possessions our family has is the flag that was taken off my father's casket and folded by an honor guard and given to my mother. There were a lot of people who've given a lot for that flag, and I just want to make sure that we're not teaching kids that America's terrible and we've got all these problems, and so we all need to protest everything that there is. I could protest a lot of things that I don't like, but I don't. And the reason I don't is because I want to respect the opportunity for people to appreciate what is good. I think we need to talk about more things that are good than things that are bad.
Thank you. Kristen?
Okay. My father is a Vietnam veteran, and he very much supports the right to kneel at a game. And I absolutely 100% support a student's right to kneel at a game. And I agree with Carolyn that the First Amendment rights of one student only stop when it starts to interfere with another student's rights. So they have the right to kneel at a game, and I would support that freedom of speech. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's a somewhat related question, but a little different. And Carolyn, we'll start with you. Please share your working definition of inclusion for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade education.
Okay, a working definition of inclusion. I would say that when you would walk into a school room and you would look at the children playing together, that you would see that the kids are not separated by race, that they're not separated by ability, that they're all playing together and respecting each other, and that no student feels left out because of his race, because of his sexual orientation, or any other protected class. So I think that my working definition of inclusion is that when you would look in a classroom, you wouldn't be able to see that anything looks different. If a kid is black or a kid is white, if they're Hispanic, that they're all playing together and that they're all respecting each other.
Thank you. John, your response.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Inclusion, I can include an awful lot of things. The example that comes to my mind is I have a niece who is blind. And in many situations, she would have been put into a separate classroom and for the kids with problems or whatever. And now in her school, she is in a class and mainstreamed. And I think that's really neat because the other kids in that class help her. They help her to get to the playground. They'll help her to understand the way the things out there work, and it's a really neat experience. Beyond that, when it comes to racism, I've always said racism ceases to exist when race ceases to matter. Lolly and I, out of our 19 grandchildren, have 4 whose other grandfather is a black man. And if I ever thought that there was anything going on in any school system, and especially this one, that would separate them because of that particular part of their race, I would be very, very upset.
Thank you. Kristen?
Thank you. Two great examples I have of inclusion that I've seen in PSD. One is story time that I do at Beatty Elementary as a librarian. And last year there was a little boy who was there and he spoke 4 languages, but not one of them was English. And the kids, they took him around and showed him where to sit and how to get to recess and where lunch was going to be, and it was fantastic to watch. The other one I was lucky enough to see today, where I go in and I do a book club for the Spectrum kids at Poudre High School. And so I was able to see inclusion there. Every race, creed, sexuality, gender identity was there today, and we were simply discussing the title, the story behind a book. And that was just a beautiful thing to see in our schools. So I'd like to see more of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Christophe?
The way I would work to define inclusion would be maybe to describe how I would work towards inclusion. And to me, it falls back on something I promote, which is developing social and emotional intelligence. If we look at students at their youngest age that they enter the district, we usually see students who have no sense of a lack of inclusion. And it's through their growing up that we learn to have fears, and we embody some of these things that start looking less like inclusion. And if we work towards helping students learn about themselves and learn about others and feeling free and comfortable, I think we gain inclusion in the process, and that's what I would do.
Thank you. Our time is almost up. There will now be a time for each candidate to give a 60-second closing statement, and I would ask that you give statements that are related to the issues discussed in the forum. And we're going to go in the reverse order of how we started. So, Carolyn, you will be first with conclusion.
Okay. I think I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about not really appreciating how important the district work was. I think that there are a lot of people in our community who are just like me, who don't realize all the important work that's going on at the schools and the tremendous amount of implications that has for the community. We've talked here today about how students are going to be our future leaders and how they're taught, how they're trained and how they're taught to treat other people are going to have profound effects on our community. And so I am very much looking forward to serving for the next 4 years and making sure that Poudre School District stays on the great track that I think it is on.
Thank you. Christophe?
I will start again by just thanking you very, very much, Ann, for the League of Women Voters having us here tonight. The opportunity to speak in front of a broader audience is just fantastic. I will say that the past 4 years have been a treasure to me. It's a civic lesson. It's something I value greatly, and it's an incredible way to volunteer. I feel that in that time, I've been able to participate in developing a vision with the district and getting that ball rolling. And I look very much forward to continuing that work of piecing together the little parts to answer the incredibly complicated questions you asked. Every one of those were ones that were very, very difficult to answer in a minute. And I love thinking about them on this board. So thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you. Kristen?
Well, again, thank you so much for having me tonight, and thank you to all who came out tonight and taking time. I do hope you will vote for me, as I am a dedicated and engaged community member, and I have spent the last 20 years volunteering for the schools and working for equality in our community. And I've been working also in the library district with all walks of life to help people succeed with the digital tools that they need. And I do think that will wrap into exactly what's going on and working with the board here. And I also have a child still in the district, and as I understand it, I would be the only member with a board member with a child in the district, which does go ahead and give me a unique insight into how the schools are functioning. So serving on the board would be, for me, a way to use my skills, my experience, my energy, and my passion for education to help the community and to help the school district that I love so very much. So thank you once again.
Thank you. John?
Thanks for letting me be here tonight. In my experience, I have had the opportunity to serve in public office. But I think the one thing that I was elected to that I look back on with the most fondness is when I was elected secretary of the Barton School PTO. And Lolly and I had kids in Barton School for 20 years straight without a break. I've been intimately involved in the schools through education of my own children, now grandchildren, and I look forward to serving on the board and bringing some of the experience I have, and also just some plain old common sense that I've developed. And lastly, when you have those things, sometimes I think I have some wisdom that I'd like to share, and I look forward to doing that. Having knowledge is important, but being able to apply that knowledge with wisdom is even more important. Knowing that a tomato is a fruit is knowledge. Knowing not to put it in a fruit salad is wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you to each of the candidates for participating in the forum and your willingness to be a public servant. In the words of Nelson Mandela, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. As a former educator myself, I firmly believe his words, as well as those from an American sage, Benjamin Franklin. An investment in knowledge pays the best interest. So to our audience and viewers, please remember to complete and return your ballot. Think of your vote as an investment. If you would like further clarification of a candidate response, or if your question didn't get answered, please try to speak with that candidate in person. There's information about membership in our league organization, which is not for women only, for anybody from 16 and older. And there's a reminder here that this forum will be available via rebroadcast on Channel 14 and also will be posted on the League of Women Voters of Larimer County website. Vote411.org is our voter information website, and it has posted candidate information for this election, and where you can also register to vote, check your registration, and view the ballot issues for your specific ballot. Finally, I'd like to express appreciation for those who attend and for those who view the forum online for being interested in this local election. You, the voter, are the lifeblood of our democratic system. Please encourage your neighbors and friends to participate in a process which makes us all equal. Good night.